Subscribe to Need to Know for the CEO podcast, and you will get to listen to and be inspired by other CEOs as they share their experiences and best practices. You'll also get to listen to subject matter experts who will brief you on what they think you need to know to do your job more effectively. The experts will occasionally include Ian and I, who will do episodes on topics like creating a winning strategy, OKR best practices, maturing metric capabilities, and building a high-performance culture, and other business news-related topics. Enjoy the show. We're back again for another fireside chat, and we're here to talk about something that's in our everyday wheelhouse for us, and that's OKRs. So something I want to get into is what the real goal of an OKR implementation is, and I think it's safe to say that there is a spoiler alert, and it's not to set goals in the OKR format. So that's obviously the thing we see a lot, and it often is failure. And what I'd like to introduce our listeners to is the concept of OKR maturity, because we hang our hat a lot off this idea, and I'd like to get into that with you, if that's okay.
Absolutely, yeah. It's really interesting, and setting OKRs in that tried and trusted format is pretty easy. I think you can probably teach someone the basics of OKRs in 20 minutes. Not surprisingly, that doesn't lead to the kind of business outcomes and change that leadership wants. So this is really interesting to dive into.
For sure. And I think I'm a kind of student of lots of goal frameworks, as I guess you are. And before the call, we were talking about V2 MOM, but obviously you've got SMART goals amongst many other types. And what you learn is that most forms of goal setting will get you so far. And if you can get a team or a company or an individual to set a goal, which is essentially just us forward winding and sort of describing a future state that we'd like to get to, that will always have some level of benefit. And in the OKR context, we kind of call that an OKR novice. And if you become, let's call it okay at that, you kind of hit this glass ceiling where you're getting benefit, but you're not getting the full benefit. So to become mature and actually pass through that glass ceiling and move towards OKR mastery, where company performance, team performance, individual performance are all being multiplied and accelerated, a number of key building blocks need to be in place. Do you want to sort of take us through some of those?
Yeah. So when I think about OKR maturity, there are quite a few elements to that, and I always talk about OKR as a strategy execution framework. So not surprisingly, that's point one on my maturity list, and there are lots of different views of what strategy is. I like to think of it in a very simple way, which is it's an evolving view of how we will win. Yeah. And to achieve that, we need to identify our customers are very clearly. We need to understand the problems we're solving for them. And in the words of Michael Porter, the essence of strategy is deciding what not to do. So it's not just about that identification of what we could do. It's about being very, very explicit about we're going to try and do this. We're going to leave this till later, or not do it at all. So having a kind of well articulated view of our strategy is, for me, it's point one.
I think to interject therein, I think it's sort of, in your opinion, and obviously we've been coaching, consulting for a long while now, how often does a leadership come to you with a fully formed, well articulated strategy? And why do you think, I think we can really guess the answer to that as well, but I'm interested in your opinion. Why do you think people find it so hard, or there's so much misunderstanding around what a genuine strategy is?
Yeah, so that's a great question. How often does a leadership team come to me with a fully formed strategy? And I'm going to give you the really obvious answer, which is almost never. But I think it's also, though, it's a continuum. It's there's a spectrum of how good or bad a strategy can be. At one extreme, a strategy is just a kind of aspiration. We want to be number one in such and such a market. Sometimes it's more nuanced. And I think back to when I was a strategist in a couple of roles, GlaxoSmithKline, for example, and I look at what I put together there, and looking back, it's quite embarrassing because I wouldn't really call that a strategy. It wasn't making clear choices. It wasn't mindful of the fact that many of our ideas don't work. So I certainly empathise with leaders who are struggling to put a good strategy together. So yeah, rarely would be my answer. How about you?
I'm the same. I anointed myself as a chief strategy officer once upon a time, and I'd read every book there was, and I like the fact that you can sort of coach yourself in strategy whilst developing. And I went to business school too, and I did a degree in it, but I wasn't any good at it back then. I was, I'm a good learner and I'm a good student, but I think probably only in the last 6 or 7 years have I really got the essence of what it is and the kind of things that you were describing there, the different ways that you can approach it and how you can kind of make it less jargon filled and take some of the bull out of it and actually make it more accessible. And I think maybe that was the issue I had, 15, 20 years ago, is it was a bit old school back then. It was full of jargon. It was complex. What you could read was orientated around companies that weren't really like your company. They were often, very big enterprise type customers or and companies and leadership teams that they were targeting. And for that, you kind of had to plug a lot of the holes yourself. And I think it's not until you kind of really get under the skin and try and simplify some of the basic principles and ideas that you and I sort of talk about and try and help teams with, that you really get to have that eureka moment where you kind of go, okay, I get what I'm trying to do now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a really interesting point you made there about the jargon, because a strategy is only as good as the communication of the strategy. And one of the problems I've seen is organizations have a clear strategy. They communicate it maybe once in a town hall, in a deck. And of course, people learn in different ways. They don't get to ask questions. So I guess the strategy is only really kind of tangible and real when everyone understands what it means and can certainly recall key elements of it. Okay, I don't expect people to understand it, remember it word for word, but that's as equally important as defining the strategy for me. And I think another important point that organizations forget is that strategy exists at multiple levels. It's not just a corporate strategy. You may have a strategy for a particular product. You may have a tech strategy. And that kind of leads me into another point, which is that everybody feeling they can contribute to that discussion. It's not your responsibility on the ground to write the strategy, but you feel that you have a voice and you can approach leaders and say, have you considered this? Or this is what our customers are saying, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think your point around being able to articulate it is critical. And that's why it can't be in a long verbose document. I think making sure that people can recall it is also as important, and that's a sign of good communication. And we certainly ask when we're getting under the skin of a company to work out how we can help them, different leaders, what they think their strategy is, and we next to never get a consistent answer from the leadership team. And I think that's indicative of kind of where we are on this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's I think that's strategy covered. And one of the final thought on why it's challenging is really because I think a lot of leaders have never seen a good strategy. I think that's the problem.
Yeah.
And I think once you see one, you kind of get to understand, okay, how can I apply that to my context?
Which leads into data. You wanted to talk us through data as it pertains to sort of OKR strategy and this idea of maturity? Yeah,
I mean, if I sort of just tell you my definition of an OKR, or certainly a key result, I think of it as a measurable beneficial outcome for somebody, usually a customer, sometimes for the business, sometimes even for a stakeholder, a supplier, for example. And one of the key parts of that is measurable. And where I see teams and organizations struggle with OKRs, it's because they haven't got an idea of the data that powers their business in many cases. So every time they come to OKR setting, it's like scrambling. Okay, what can we measure? How can we push things forward? Whereas if you have what I would call a persistent data model, and that's going back to your jargon point, that sounds like jargon, but by persistent I mean it's not a one-off and you throw away. It's something that you use over time, and using over time means it evolves. So that data model is never right, and it connects to what in strategic terms I think of as a narrative. So when you describe how you think you can succeed as a business, what your data model does is bring that into a kind of more measurable world. So you talk about levers in a strategic narrative, they should be really explicit in a data model. And so think of it in a really simple way, just to de-jargon a little bit. You think of a tree of data where progressively as you move up the branches of a tree, you're moving further away from kind of top level items like revenue, but you're moving towards things that maybe teams can control in a reasonable time period. So for me, that's a really kind of simple version of a model, a KPI tree, and it just makes OKR settings so much easier. What was your experience of a tree and models generally?
So obviously we run workshops on KPI trees. As a tool, I think it's incredibly powerful. And when we do get the chance to support teams in creating these and understanding how they're created, and this idea of influence and confidence and the ability to have hypotheses on what metrics might influence another metric. And when you do those exercises and how they act on the big headline KPIs, so things like revenue or customer satisfaction or more strategic orientated KPIs, once you see that cascade and when you're having those hypotheses and when you're proving those relationships, has all kinds of implications for not just how we set goals and set key results and that ability to act on those lead indicators that are really good predictors of future performance. It also allows us to improve our reporting, allows us to onboard new staff, to give them purpose because they know what they're there to do. But as a kind of enabler of not just OKR mastery, but also team performance, culture building, providing purpose, I think it has much wider ramifications, and it is an important tool to have in your toolkit.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think you've touched on some great kind of benefits that people don't necessarily think about with a data model. I mean, this idea that you come into a new team and you're trying to understand, okay, how does this team win? How do we feel we're beating our competitors? And you can tell a story around that, and I think that's really important.
Yeah.
But having the data and seeing, okay, oh yeah, right, they're trying to use this lever to have this outcome. It's just incredibly insightful for most of us, I think. Yeah, so 100% agreed. It's an incredibly powerful tool, underused. But this idea also that you said there again, you mentioned about there are hypotheses. I think there's a great phrase about models that all models are wrong.
Yeah.
Some models are useful.
Yeah.
Absolutely applies to that. It'll never reflect the real world exactly. That's not its job. It's to help you gain insights into the things you can do to achieve the goals you want for you and your customers. And yeah, the idea of this, how strong is a connection between two elements in your tree, and being mindful about that and honest and open. Sometimes you see a data model and it's black and white. It's this lever, leads to this outcome. It's never really like that. You need to know, how powerful that relationship is, and how confident are you that it's really going to have the impact you expect.
For sure. Do you want to talk to us about sort of OKRs as they relate to both department and sub-teams of that department, and then cross-functional OKRs, and what we tend to see out in the wild and how people approach those?
Yeah, so I think really, really interesting kind of that journey of maturity that we talk about. I think back to the first time I used OKRs, and we started with a leadership team which was cross-functional, and we talked about some of the things we could achieve, and that was a good discussion. The mistake we had made then was that functional leads jumped off and built their own OKRs, which had absolutely no relationship to each other. So the technology team had some things which, they were useful outcomes, but potentially completely clash with what the product team were trying to do. And this to me is a really, this is not just a kind of OKR discussion, but the key outcomes we want as a business tend to be things that are achieved by cross-functional teams. They're not achieved by just the engineers working on themselves. It's you think of it can be, what is it? It's kind of engineering, marketing, sales, UX, design, customer success. When you get a group like that coming together to own an outcome, it's incredibly powerful. And this is a little bit of the challenge really for OKRs, is if you're in an organization where it's very functionally oriented, where people report as an engineering leader, reports an engineering manager who sets my goals, who sets my performance measurements, it can be quite tricky to start to embrace cross-functional OKRs. It's a real challenge. And I think it's where OKRs start to leak in almost into organizational design and topologies. I think of probably one of the best examples in the world is Amazon, who use this idea of the single-threaded team who are responsible for one problem, and that mix of that team will be the people they need to achieve their goal. It won't be 10 engineers. It'll be all the roles I mentioned before. They also talk about the 2 pizza team. Don't know if you heard of that one.
Of course.
And that team needs to be not so big that everyone can't contribute, but you need that mix of roles. So this is, I think, an incredibly important area for OKRs. It's one of the most early but important signs of progress is you've broken out of these functional silos to create cross-functional OKRs. What were some of the things you've seen that challenges that?
So the first thing I was kind of reflecting on as you were saying that is, when you and I do workshops, they're often represented by a number of teams in those workshops where we're kind of exploring what the strategy is, what the priorities are, what are we going to need to achieve in order to execute that strategy, and how rarely the OKRs that fall out of that are walled by one team, i.e. they would exist in one team only. And that's one of the big eureka moments I quite like in OKRs when you kind of facilitate those sessions, is everybody realizes they need each other at the end of those kind of multi-day workshops, and that they actually can't achieve what really matters separately. If you'd have given the task of, here's a company OKR, everybody go away and create your team OKRs, they would probably also come up with very different things. And I think that's indicative of kind of the power of cross-functional groups and actually solving problems together and appreciating what each other does as well. And I think that's one of the things that always excites me, is that when you have teams that sort of self-declare that they operate in silos, when you bring them together to actually get under the hood of what the company needs, they learn what each other does, almost like for the first time. And it's a little strange, but always nice to see that when they actually leave those sessions appreciating each other a little bit more. Which is kind of, again, it feels like common sense. And a lot of what we do and talk about is actually common sense, but it's common sense that seems to be hard to get right in the business environment. And then the other thing that I think to kind of just focus on is also those lessons from Amazon, of which, we can read about in books, and they are quite powerful in many ways, whether it's the pizza idea. And the phrase that I kind of took out of a book many years ago is, if you want to make your kind of top goals or your priorities and other teams' priorities, they're probably going to fail, because, you've got to set each goal or each OKR up for success. And if that's requiring on people to, change their BAU activities, change their own priorities, to give up time, to work late, and you're not resourcing these things for success, then actually the risk profile on good OKRs is very high. And that's probably one of the sort of high level skills that we dig it quite deeply into is that whole idea of resourcing. Do we have the time, people, resource, tech? What are we going to need? What are the issues that are going to come up, the pre-mortem that we're might have to deal with, and how do we kind of make this as smooth and as quick as possible in order to make progress and actually make this achievable? There is nothing worse than a goal that's not achievable for demoralizing a team, or realizing that you're falling behind very early on and you're being pulled from pillar to post, yet you're still turning up to these check-ins and not feeling like you are contributing, when actually the reality is you're working really hard, right?
Yeah, and I think this kind of connects back to kind of having a few goals. And one of the things you see organizations struggle with early on, I got one example I often think about, where I came into an organization who struggled with OKRs, and I think they were 250 people, growing rapidly, very successful business, but were stalling a bit. And the first thing I asked is, okay, let's look at your OKRs now. There were 750 OKRs between 250 people, so three per person, let alone anything at a team level. And really reducing that down is one of the first steps. Being clear about what's important. But then that kind of rolls on a little bit into one of the challenges, which is not an OKR challenge, but I see with effectiveness of teams, is how much work in progress they've got on.
Yeah.
And a lot of that isn't necessarily explicit. And a technique I love using is just put a post-it note up for everything you've worked on in the last 2 weeks. And people are shocked. Across a team that's supposed to be maybe working on one or two things together, there'll be a whole host of things that they're working on. And one thing I love to get an organization to do is actually to say, you're ring-fenced, you're working on this OKR, it's your top priority. Yeah, okay, people, there's going to be some interruptions, but this is the thing you're working on. You're not going to be working on BAU. You're the team for this OKR. It's tough because it's often not how teams have worked in the past.
Yeah. I think that just sort of relates to the idea of working more in serial than parallel, and that idea or concept of diluting your effort, and how frustrating that is for anybody. And if we're doing 5 things when we get up and we're bouncing between them, and perhaps no order or sequence or even priority amongst those, that doesn't make for a great day. When you've got one big thing to achieve and you can achieve it, that's obviously much better. So I think there's, there are again very simple ideas, and some of those draw on things like Agile. That idea that we can have a backlog of things we want to achieve, and those things can sometimes be OKRs too. But we can draw down as and when we have the time, people, resource, etc., as and when required, as opposed to having them all active right away.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean the old Kanban board. When you set one of those up and are really honest about the work that's going on, it's an eye opener. It really is for teams. So yeah, this is a powerful lesson, I believe.
So I think in related to this kind of data and metric maturity, that idea of separating out the how. What have you seen in the field here? Yeah,
this is in some ways the crux for me of kind of product management and OKRs. And it's a really fascinating question. I know we've touched on this in the past, where what is a leadership team hiring OKRs to do? And sometimes they may say it's better outcomes, more focus. But honestly, in some cases, it's because they feel they've lost control and they want better insights into what teams are doing. Now, the thing about OKRs is it goes hand in hand with this idea that we don't know what's going to work. And if you think about that really, really clearly, the conclusion it leads you to is, I need to find out what's going to work quickly, which means short feedback loops. And when you set OKRs, what you should be thinking about is outcomes, as I said before, those measurable beneficial effects.
Yeah.
But then you don't tell a team how they're going to achieve it, because you're forgetting this lesson that most ideas don't work. You're also forgetting that the team is best placed to work out how to achieve those goals.
Yep.
They're closer to the customers. They're closer to the technology. They're the ones who can actually, come up with the best way to achieve an outcome. So you have to separate those two things out.
Yeah.
Often it isn't the case, and it's not necessarily that leadership are enforcing it. I mean, some cases it is. It's this idea of the feature factory, but sometimes the team just think, okay, what are we going to build next? And as humans, we jump to solutions. If you think of the book Thinking Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman, and this idea that we have two brains, one which kind of stops and thinks, and one that jumps to a solution. It works, but it happens in organizations as well. And we do think, okay, we're going to build the next feature, we're going to build a new payment model, and really what OKRs are telling us to do is to slow down a little bit, and to embrace the fact that we need to test these ideas. Having a 9-month project that builds something beautiful and then doesn't achieve our goal is completely pointless. So this separation of what we're trying to achieve and how we're going to achieve it is right at the heart of sort of product management and OKRs for me. And it's not easy. I mean, that empowered model involves trust. It involves, if you're moving away from a feature factory, it involves better communication on both sides. It involves giving different updates. So yeah, to me, this is bang in the center of the problem with many OKR implementations. What about you? What have you seen?
Obviously, you talked a lot about product there, and I've managed product as well, and that idea of hypothesis and proof point and the different ways of quickly and effectively proving a hypothesis or disproving, and is important. But it's also important for other teams. Marketing need to do the same. So does sales, and they can create their hypotheses and beliefs as to how they're going to generate more leads or more customers or higher conversion rates. And that has many names too, growth hacking being one, and that idea that we're going to run these experiments, and it's no surprise that we coach that experimentation capability and mindset as part of an OKR session, because by the end of it, teams start talking with sentences like "I believe," and once they do that, and that sort of logical building steps that actually then follows. It's incredibly powerful, and personally, I find it really rewarding when people start to think like that, and then think, "How can I prove it? How can I improve it quickly?" As opposed to going straight to code or investing in an agency or a campaign or a build that's really expensive without really kind of proving something first, and adding a bit more robustness and science to what we do. But I think there's another element to it that I really like, which is, if you can be explicit about the steps and things that you would need to do, or have a hypothesis for what you need to do in order to achieve the outcome that's stated in your OKR, what the kind of researchers have found is that creates more belief that a goal can be achieved. If I can break it down into the steps, I now have more belief, and that what comes with that belief is also more resilience. So if something goes wrong, if we get sidetracked, because you've been as part of those planning steps, you're going to get back on track more easily, which I think is important. And also, by getting down into the weeds of the how, you can be more inclusive. Lots of people have ideas for how an outcome might be achieved. If they can be part of that, they're part of the goal too. And I think that's an important, probably underappreciated part of that.
Yeah, this resilience is really interesting as a point, actually, because we are not used to accepting we've failed and we're wrong. And that's actually what learning is. In most cases, it's just accepting that idea didn't work. And it's really hard, especially think of the sunk cost fallacy. We start off an idea and we really believe it's going to work. We're so confident. And it's a knockback to accept, well, this approach isn't going to work. Or even, we'll maybe talk about this a bit later, but this OKR isn't right. And that once you've done that a few times and then found a path that succeeds, then that's when you start to really build that resilience. So okay, this idea didn't work, but we'll find one that does.
And which then taps again into sort of those evergreen principles of things like psychological safety, fear of failure, ability to learn and fail.
And we're starting to touch on culture there, which is a whole other topic.
For sure.
But incredibly important. And yeah, if your leaders are being open and saying, yeah, failure is fine, failure is learning, it becomes a lot easier for the teams to think in that way too.
So I know you and I talk a lot about kind of check-ins, meetings, communications, retrospectives, all those kind of buzzwords that are associated with OKRs. Do you want to sort of go into why they're critical and actually probably the sort of health of those as a leading indicator as to whether you're going to succeed with OKRs? Because I know you have some strong opinions on this.
Yeah, and this goes back to quite a few years ago. I was working with Felipe Castro, who some people may know, and we kind of came up with our hypothesis for client success, which was, are the leaders turning up for check-ins on a frequent, regular basis?
Yeah.
And there's a few reasons why it's so important. I think number one, because if your OKRs, which they should do, reflect your most important goals, why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the first question. And if they're not, if they're not turning up, that suggests to me that the goals we haven't identified the most important goals because they don't care about them. Number two, if you're turning up to those meetings, I guess what you're doing is you are buying into the whole process of OKRs as implementing OKRs as a learning journey. This journey towards maturity that we talk about a lot. So there's the cadence, which is important. There's who's turning up is important, but then you need the right discussions. And this is one of the things where I think consultants can really help, because what leadership teams sometimes fail to do is kind of be cynical about the discussion. So what you should be talking about in an OKR check-in is, are we going to achieve them? Is our current route going to help us achieve our key results? And I'm sure you've seen similar things. I've seen it many times where, yep, we're going to do it. Month 1, we're going to do it. Week 5, week 6, yeah, we're great. You get to week 7 and all of a sudden it's amber. We're not so sure now.
Yeah.
And by the end of the period, all of a sudden, we didn't achieve it.
Yeah.
Now, how do you avoid that? I think it's actually by, at the start of the quarter, saying, okay, you're saying you're green here. What's the evidence behind it? It's really challenging people's perceptions.
Yeah.
And once you start to do that, I think you have much more informed, open, and engaged discussions, and that's critical in those OKR check-ins for me. And what that leads to is, for me, the next step, which is being more conscious about what you're doing. I think in lots of cases, and I've seen it and I've been guilty of it, we kind of sleepwalk into just following a path that we've laid out before without really checking if it's the right path. So when leaders are in those sessions and they're saying, okay, what are we doing next week to help us achieve our OKRs? And is what we thought the best approach, is it still the best approach? And making these conscious decisions, being rigorous with each other about our opinions and where they come from, it to me is absolutely the best leading indicator that your OKR program is going to succeed. And succeed for me means that you achieve business outcomes ultimately. I mean, that's why we do these things. At the very, very end of it, we may say we need more focus or better alignment, but ultimately it's to make the business succeed. And those discussions are the best leading indicator that you're going to get somewhere and get what you need.
There's so many important ideas and concepts related to this. I mean, obviously, you've got the ability to actually meet as a team and generate value in that meeting. And we have, coaching programs just around meetings for that reason, because we spend an enormous amount of time in those. And if we can have them with a kind of higher ROTI, which stands for return on time invested, then, that allows us to achieve more, increase productivity, etc. But as far as the OKR meeting goes, that ability to check, is this still the right goal? Are we measuring the right things? What issues do we need to solve? What priorities do we need to set? They're actually quite efficient, short meetings that have a very high return on time invested when you get them right. But like something new, when it gets introduced, it is a ritual. It doesn't have to become habitual. We have to be able to ensure that it is a good use of our time, and the OKRs and the things we're doing and the conversations that we're tracking have to be the right things. And of course, some of the frustrations we often see are teams are being dragged into BAU. Therefore, actually, there's not much to talk about this week on the OKR because we were doing other stuff, which is, again, a failure in some of the planning sometimes. Which then again, you've got to be brave enough to talk about, which is, once upon a time, we said this was, business critical. It was material to how, we're going to achieve what's going to allow us to thrive in our market, yet something else has taken over that's, probably less important, but hey ho, that's just what we've got to do now. You've got to have the ability to say that out loud and come together as a team and actually decide whether this, this is more important than that. How do we invest our resources more smartly in generating the outcomes that we want? And I think sort of one of the things that I know you're keen on observing as part of the mastery maturity idea is also then the ability just to say, stop. Do you want to talk to me about that?
Yeah. Just before I jump, I think you really touched on a really crucial point there, which is this idea of what people are working on. And it links back to our point about a few important goals. And when you see that there's no progress, a great question to ask there is, what are you really working on?
Yeah.
Because often in organizations, pet projects kind of sneak through the OKR process and teams get drugged onto that, or individuals, and calling that out and talking about it can be really powerful in a leadership context. Yeah. So this idea of stopping or saying stop. If we go back to our data model and we think there, that in itself is a set of hypotheses with some, levels of strength and confidence in how strong those relationships are between items. And when we implement OKRs, we're looking to identify our leading indicators. So these are the things that a team can influence in the period of an OKR that leads us towards a business outcome. And we have to appreciate that is in itself a hypothesis. Now, we may find that we're moving the needle on an OKR, but we realize that in essence, that isn't connecting up to the outcome and the business outcome we thought it was.
Yeah.
And so when you're using OKRs, it's important to regularly step out of the kind of this very narrow metric that you're looking at and saying, okay, is the wider hypothesis still holding true? And you'll find sometimes that, we thought that moving this needle would achieve this goal. It doesn't.
Yeah.
I think when you find that, it's hard again because sunk cost fallacy comes in again. You've got to say, stop. This isn't the right thing to be working on. And that's one example. Another example would be, we thought we could influence this metric. We've tried 3 or 4 different ways. We've used short feedback loops. This isn't something that we can actually influence. And you need to also to recognize when that's the case. And that can be a strategic change at some level, but it all comes back to this, don't throw good money after bad. When you realize something's not working at whatever level, stop and rethink.
Yeah. So if you, we've gone quite deep, certainly spent more time than we expected to talk about OKR maturity, but I think that's
pet project
measure of its success. It's such an important idea, and it's taken us both a long time to realize that, and obviously be able to sort of help people get up that curve. And we get to see a number of failed implementations. I think that's fair to say, without wanting to put people off trying to embrace OKRs as a framework, and obviously we're very passionate about that. We see, I'm guessing 70-80% of our work comes from an implementation that we've been asked to optimize. It's obviously great to get in there before that happens. I thought we would just maybe spend sort of 5 minutes just talking through the process of an implementation. If anyone's listening to this and thinking they might want to do it. And if I kick off by sort of just saying, well, we'd like to know kind of where are you now, which is a 101 planning step, right? Which is trying to agree what success criteria is, who's going to be involved, what's the strategy, what goals or KPIs are kind of in existence now, and getting under the skin of the individual and the business. And I think what's hopefully good about what we do, and that's certainly, I think it's probably the bedrock of our success, is that you and I then go into this big sort of preparation mode where we kind of work out, how do we train this company, not a generic company? How do we train these people, not a, the kind of vanilla management team in a nondescript industry? And for me, that sort of lays the foundations for us to succeed. And I'm guessing that's true of any company. They've got to know where they're starting from, and they've got to know what success looks like.
Yeah, and this is, this is one of the things that I think frustrates people most. You look at social media, and it's full of blueprints. Just do this in your context, and it will succeed.
Yeah.
If you follow the NVIDIA model, or if you follow the Spotify model, you will achieve the same goals. It's just really a complete illusion. You need to know what your strengths and weaknesses are, what your capabilities are, and you also need to know what success is. Okay, ultimately it's going to come down to, business is about making a profit, but your strategy is about, okay, how are you going to get there? So having an honest reflection about where you are, how mature are we at writing a strategy? How good is our narrative? How good are we communicating a strategy? Do we have the right kind of culture to make this succeed? You're never going to come from the same place twice.
Yeah.
So, as consultants, our job is to understand that context and to ask the right questions, to understand, where they're pretty good already, what they do well, what they don't do so well, what gaps need filling. So yeah, context is absolutely everything for most change, but even more so when you're looking at something so fundamental as strategy and OKRs.
And I think that sort of brings us on to kind of, there are lots of courses out there. There are lots of books you can read in the generic sense about this, and you can get so far. But it's not a belief, it's fact, actually. The thing that I know to be true is we are way more successful at coaching and teaching OKRs to the point, as defined by people, just get it and can do it and will keep it as a kind of management skill or capability for life, when we work on their business, on their priorities, on the things they want to achieve, on the outcomes they want to achieve, without ever really calling it OKRs along that journey. What amazes me is how late on in our workshops we get into OKR theory, and they've pretty much done OKRs by the time we're talking about the format, the acronym, etc. Yet they realize they've been doing it all along and they can do it.
Yeah, 100%. It just that very neatly explains why OKRs are actually a small jigsaw piece in a big complex puzzle. And what makes it even more challenging is that no two puzzles look exactly the same.
Yeah.
And the OKR piece, the definition of OKR may be the same everywhere, but that's such a simple part to fix. And that's why I think OKRs are seductive, because people read Measure What Matters, for example. This is pretty easy. I can apply that to my context. And then when they get there, it is the answers to many questions I have just don't exist in the book. They're just not there. You get that from experience of various contexts. What do I need to change to make OKRs work here, or to achieve the goals of OKRs, more importantly? Yeah.
What I also find is usually missing is the planning that's necessary in order to get beyond the leadership team coming together and having a go, to scaling that knowledge and capability throughout the company in a way that is consistent at a very high level, and takes into account that people come into the organization possibly with different experiences and also leave the organization and get replaced. So a large amount of planning goes into, what is the management system here? How do we become or provide clarity on how OKRs are going to be used in this business, in the context of that business, and how they will not only be used in the company at a team level, but how they will impact you as an individual. And what I've found is, if you leave those question marks out there, people fill in the blanks. So by removing the blanks, then people understand the role OKRs will play inside the company. And then that ability to train, coach, and upskill on demand is really important too, because the workforce is very fluid and dynamic inside most companies, and these skills can both bleed in and out. And what you want to do is maintain them at a very high level. So I think that's kind of obviously a building block we're pretty proud of. But I think the kind of, you mentioned it earlier, and then possibly the most underappreciated one is this in-cycle support, where you, me, or the team will join processes like check-ins and retrospectives and setting sessions in the early quarters in order to ensure that these new habits, rituals stick and they become normalized, where, like anything new, it's a bit alien at the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I think what you get from an experience we've got is you start to recognize, context and where people's mental models are different. And we all come from different backgrounds. It's, even something which is quite prescriptive like Scrum.
Yeah.
Two people come from two different organizations and have completely different views of how it works. Now, if you leave that, as you say, unwritten or unanswered, they both continue to work in the way that they previously had.
Yeah.
When we help organizations make really key things explicit, people are much clearer on what their role is, what good looks like. And we're helping them get the experience of, what a good check-in looks like. Many people never been to one. They've never had those tough questions. I remember asking a CEO once who was a little bit blasé about something, and he kind of stopped in his tracks and he said, "Yeah, you're right. I'm kind of assuming something there, and I've kind of put that assumption is really critical." And previously, no one had asked those tough questions. They kind of just took each other's opinions as gospel. So yeah, our experience is incredibly useful in those situations, and sort of bringing people into I guess a shared understanding of what they're trying to do and how they're going to do it.
I'm guessing anyone listening to this has kind of realized we're very passionate about this. It's a tool we very much believe in. It has enormous potential, and when you feel the full force of OKRs, you're really feeling the full force of strategy, teamwork, silo breaking, metricization, predictive analytics, amongst the many things that we've talked about today. And I think maybe that's the take home for people listening, and certainly kind of one of the big learning moments for me on this journey has been, it doesn't sit in its own isolated bucket. It is way more than the acronym. Its implications of wanting to implement OKR successfully and reach that maturity level are far and reaching. And anyone going on that journey that doesn't probably appreciate or address that, who is trying to approach it as a simple, framework to, set goals in different teams, is probably missing out on the benefit. But as I stated earlier, there is some benefit to that for sure. But the real secret sauce, the real superpowers come later.
Yeah, and I think the key word I would take home from all this is journey, because it's never over. You can always get better. You can always improve.
Yes,
your understanding of the world changes.
Yeah.
You've got to evolve with it.
Yeah, great chat, mate. Thanks. And I hope everybody enjoyed that listening.
Great, thanks, Matt. Enjoyed it.
Take care.